Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another Sponge Chat. My name is Jim. I'm the author of Sponge ELT, and it's lovely to have you here. This Sponge Chat is quite different to some of the other Sponge Chats I've done. I have a very special guest, Andy Hockley, who is an ELT management professional in general, but specifically for our sector. Very, very well renowned globally for his expertise within ELT management. And we looked at that area as opposed to some of the other areas that we've looked at. We've looked at teacher training, materials writing, publishing, and so this was really interesting to go into another area that teachers might like to move in their career. So for those of you that don't know Andy, he co-authored one of the, you might call the Bibles on ELT management, Teacher to Manager, in 2008, and he's also authored a number of other titles as well. And he also spoke to us about some of the interesting things that are coming out in the near future, we'll say. On a personal note, it was really interesting to speak with Andy and go back and forth about some of the challenges I've had moving into different roles, and his thoughts on that and how those are perhaps reflected in the wider ELT community, ELT management community as well. So that was really interesting. So as usual, I hope that you find value in this Sponge Chat. For those of you that are looking to move into an academic management position, or perhaps are already in an academic management position, hopefully this rings for you and you find value in this. If you do like this video, please give us a like, please subscribe, please comment, get in touch somehow. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. And of course, if you have any questions or requests, I'd like to hear them as well. So without further ado, let's get into it. I hope you enjoy this one, and I'll see you for the next one. Okay? Bye. Hi, Andy. How are you?
Hi, Jim. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you very much for being here this afternoon. I believe you're in Transylvania, is that correct?
I am. I'm in Transylvania.
Yeah.
It's a very hot day today.
Hot day. I just don't even know what to imagine Transylvania like. You could call me very naive with that. I suppose I just think of vampires.
It's mountains, forests,
Yeah.
and it's very rural and
Right.
I would call a medieval lifestyle. You've got people cutting the grass with scythes, and you've got horse carts. I mean, I live in a small village, and
Right.
basically half the traffic outside the house is by horse cart.
Wow, jeez, that's a completely different world. I mean, I live in the north of Spain, Zaragoza, and very different, kind of a big city sort of place.
Yeah.
Right. Well, let's get into it. I suppose before we get into it, we could talk about the purpose of Sponge Chats, why we're here. So I received a question quite a while ago from a teacher asking me how I got into teacher training, and I realized that for many people, it's quite a kind of different how they move into their positions within ELT. And Sponge Chats, I've had the pleasure to speak with materials writers and other teacher trainers, but as of yet, I haven't actually spoken to any academic managers or people like yourself who are, very well known internationally for your knowledge in academic management. And so I'd like today is to really to get your opinion on how ELT professionals might move into academic management positions and some of the career paths they might take, in the hope that people stay within ELT. That's what I'm trying to achieve there. So I suppose without further ado, should we get to you? Who is Andy?
Well, sort of professionally, I guess I have been teaching English I've been in the English teaching business for over 30 years now.
Yeah.
I'm so long in the tooth that I actually did the RSA certificate rather than the CELTA, because
Wow.
the CELTA didn't exist when I did it. So it was the precursor to the CELTA was the RSA certificate. So I did that back in 88, I believe. And since that time, I did lots of teaching in lots of different countries, including Spain, where you are. I did a Delta, but that wasn't called a Delta then either. It was a DipTESOL, I think it was called, in the mid-90s. And ultimately ended up doing an MA in the States in international and intercultural management.
Wow.
Which was really interesting because I kind of wanted to get out of teaching. Basically, I sort of felt like I'd hit a wall. I wanted to do something else, but all I knew was teaching because I did it straight out of university. But then I realized, obviously, because I lived in about 9 countries by then, I had intercultural experience, and I used that too. So kind of combine the two in sort of management, interculturally, internationally, and then actually ended up back in ELT on the same campus because the same university had an MA in TESOL.
Right.
So I ended up working in that department, managing projects. And then from then on, I sort of moved on. And so I've been freelance now and living in Romania for 17 years. Actually, today is the 17th anniversary of me moving to Romania.
Wow.
I moved on Bastille Day, and we're talking on Bastille Day.
Yeah, wow. Happy anniversary, I suppose. I mean, I suppose we've just condensed a very long career into about 2 minutes there. And more specifically, if we could focus perhaps on the idea of academic management, because obviously you're well, I mean, you've written, or you're a co-author of Teacher to Manager, I believe it was. And also you have your blog. I'm not sure if you still write on the blog.
Very rarely. I always want to, but it's one of those things that goes on the back burner. It's not an urgent thing, so I tend not to do it as much as I should. But
yeah. So I mean, your journey into academic management. What was You said that you hit the wall with teaching, and you wanted to. I imagine you didn't want to stay in teaching within EOT, or you just wanted to move into management. What was the motivation to sort of specialize in that area?
Initially I sort of felt like I wanted something more than just teaching. And obviously, as you know, and there aren't that many options for, there's many teachers.
Yeah.
And then, you can do teacher training, you can do materials writing, you can do management, but there aren't that many of those jobs around compared to all of the teachers in there. So, I mean, it wasn't like I was sitting there thinking, I want to be a manager, I want to be a trainer or whatever. It's just that I wanted to do something else.
Yeah.
Which is why I chose the MA I chose, which actually took me into management.
Yeah.
And I didn't really anticipate being back in ELT, but that's how it turned out for me. I turned out to be working in a management role in ELT, and in different forms, and then beyond that, training in management in ELT, and writing about it. And so that's what I do now. Basically, I'm a trainer and writer about ELT management with some management. I do. I don't just train and write about it. I do some management. I work during normal times when people can move around. I work as one of the academic directors of the Bell Teaching Campus in the UK, in Cambridge.
I mean, obviously, one of the most prestigious academies or institutions in the world. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you're still the president, or did you finish being the president of the LAMSIG? I wasn't sure.
No, I've just finished. I've just stepped down. I stepped down at the most recent conference, which was in June.
Yeah.
Because there's a 6-year, 3 or a 6-year job.
Oh, okay.
It's actually technically coordinator, not president.
Right.
So so my 6 years as coordinator finished this year. So I stepped down as coordinator. I'm at the moment, I'm still on the committee, but that won't be for a very long time. I'll move off that too. But
okay.
I'm still very much involved in LAMSIG. Yeah.
It seems like you're involved with everywhere. You also had, I believe, you were running the international diploma on language teaching or management and language teaching, was it?
IDLTM, International Diploma in Language Teaching Management.
Yeah. Was that discontinued?
No, it's not discontinued exactly.
Right.
So very briefly, if I can sum this up very briefly, the course started in around 2000 is when we wrote the curriculum, basically, the syllabus and assessment guidelines. And it was 3 institutions that were involved in it. SIT, which is where I worked in America at that time,
Right.
University of Queensland in Australia, and what was called then UCCLES, it's now
Right.
Cambridge Assessment. And those 3 organizations basically put this course together, and we ran the first course in 2001. And at some point, maybe about 5 years ago, Cambridge decided not to be involved any longer.
Okay.
So it's no longer as part of the Cambridge suite, but the course carried on as before.
Right.
Mostly run from Australia, from the University of Queensland.
Right.
And that's where I've been essentially working for it, for the last 15 years, more or less. Most of my employment as a freelancer
has been through them.
Has been through the University of Queensland, because of the devastation wreaked on the Australian ELT market, as it has on the UK ELT market by the pandemic. University of Queensland are also not going to be involved really so much with the course anymore. Right. But myself and a colleague who have been involved from the beginning are attempting to kind of rebuild it and recreate it in maybe a purely online format, because it used to be
brilliant
face-to-face and an online. So right now, at the moment, it's not happening, but we hope with it by the end of this year we'll be able to announce running online versions of the course.
That's amazing. Brilliant. Excellent.
Which will be good, which we're hoping that goes down well.
Yeah. But I mean, it seems like something. I mean, we're going to get to looking at sort of advice and challenges in a sec, but it definitely seems like it's a course that would help quite a number of teachers or professionals, I say, move into management. So I mean, you yourself, you've kind of gone through the whole journey, a very long journey, but you've also been involved with a lot of training, quite prestigious institutions, DipTESOL as well. I imagine there must have been some challenges along the way working in academic management. Are there any that sort of spring to mind?
In academic management specifically, well, I guess, I mean, the problem with in some ways, the problems in any kind of position become other problems. They sort of mirror each other throughout. So, probably as a teacher, one of the biggest problems you face occasionally is awkward students.
Right.
and possibly as a trainer, one of the biggest problems you often face is awkward students. And as a manager, one of the biggest problems you face is awkward people, basically, right. Or awkward, whether they be employees or whatever. So, I mean, that's kind of one of the sort of the biggest issues that people face. I think academic management, one of the sort of the big difficulty of academic management is that essentially you're acting as a buffer.
Right.
You are like so there's below you, if I don't like to use the word below because I don't like to think that there's a hierarchy, but in a traditional way we view an organization, there is a hierarchy.
Of course.
And as the academic manager, you're above these coordinators maybe, and then teachers. And then above you is the upper management of the organization. Obviously, if you work for a university, that means someone part of the university. If you work for a private language school, that maybe means the owner.
Yeah.
If you work for somebody else, it's somebody else, but somebody kind of above you. And your job as an academic manager, as in fact in all middle management positions, which is what it is dealing with that.
The demands of both
having
sides.
To filter stuff. You're basically filtering stuff.
Right.
So you're acting as an advocate for the staff on your team to upper management, and often you're being kind of given directives to give to the academic team, which you maybe don't believe in, or you maybe don't necessarily feel are the right way to go, but sometimes you don't have a choice in the matter.
Of course.
So that kind of that buffer role, I think, is maybe the biggest challenge that many academic managers face. And in the past, that's where it's sort of trying to meet the needs of the teachers and help the teachers be able to do their job at the best in the best way possible, but also kind of deal with those upper concerns that come in that you have to manage.
That's interesting. I've just recently moved into an assistant DOS position in a local language academy, in my language academy, and I'm quite lucky. My director, who's also the owner of the academy, is very, very supportive, and it's very democratic in everything that goes on. I think so. So I think I'm quite lucky in that. Mm-hmm. I've been in other institutions where it hasn't been like that. So, and I could. The DOS at this time, as you said, acted as that buffer from perhaps directives from the owner that wasn't really teacher focused. So so I imagine she must have had to deal with a lot of things there. So that's really interesting that you mentioned that as a challenge.
I think it's kind of and there's also partly what I would call balancing the business side and the academic side.
Yeah,
we have this kind of as educators, which nearly all academic managers are former teachers or still teachers.
Of course.
And it's it's that kind of, I understand what educational quality looks like, what good education looks like, what good learning looks like, what I want to be possible here.
Yeah.
But then the business imperative, which tends to be about numbers of students in the classroom, for example, or numbers of, or how much money you're making and so on. And balancing those two things sometimes is the big challenge.
I think that's something that a lot of teachers, I know myself, before I moved into working more with sort of the leaders of the schools I've been with, I didn't really think about the business side. I sort of thought about simply the pedagogic side of the language school. This is what we do. And so that's something difficult that I think communicating that business side to teachers as well can be quite difficult, I think.
No, definitely it can be.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of obviously you work or you train people in who are either in management positions or moving into management positions. If you had to define or choose a number of characteristics or qualities of what makes an effective or a successful manager, what would they be? I mean, I imagine you've got a list, and in fact, there are books written on this. But if you had to nail it down to a number of maybe 2, 3, or 4, are there any that stand out as the go-to ones?
As academic manager, I think your key role is basically it's a set of emotional skills. Let's go emotional intelligence skills. It's dealing with, it's being a good listener, being empathetic, being able to kind of to balance people, to be able to manage conflict. So it's that kind of what I think sometimes get called soft skills, those kind of let's call them human relations skills. It's many of which we have as teachers. I mean, as teachers, those are skills that we kind of have. We know we need to balance things. We know we need to give people a voice. We know we need to listen to students, etc., etc. And then when you move into management, it's somehow similar except different.
Right.
So you're using very much the same skills. It's just that one of the biggest challenges that new managers face, in my experience, is dealing with the fact that their relationship to their colleagues just changed.
Right.
Especially because most managers kind of become managers in a school where they've worked as a teacher. That's the most common route up. So you move up into a senior teacher, let's say, or an ADOS or whatever role. And then suddenly people who were your peers are no longer exactly your peers anymore. Right. And dealing with that kind of that slight challenge of working with people with whom your relationship has changed. Yeah. It may well be that outside of the workplace, you can retain the relationship you had with them before, but within the workplace, your relationship has changed, like it or not. You can't do anything about that. It's not avoidable. And yet many people would like it to be, and they try and pretend that it's not different, but it is different. And there's no way of getting around it. And you have to deal with the fact that has changed. And that's one of the biggest challenges. It can be quite a lonely move.
Right.
Because suddenly you feel like, okay, these people now are sort of in opposition to me rather than in a team with me.
That's I mean, that's really I think you've hit a point there. I mean, in terms of my big changes within my own career, moving into sort of the defined teacher trainer of the academy, I sort of was promoted there within the same academy. And being as a teacher trainer, I wasn't in any particular position of power apart from providing feedback to teachers. But that certainly changed the dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't positive for a lot of some of it was quite negative, I think. And I found that really difficult to deal with, because I liked the social element that I had with my colleagues.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed like when I went to the staff room, that it was just a complete change, just because I put into
just
that.
because you had this new role. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's how it is. And it's sort of one of those things, when you walk in front of a class of students as a teacher, because of who you are and who they are, there's an automatic kind of role understanding, and sort of, and the students are very happy just to kind of, to trust you, and to know that you know what you're doing and that you will lead them along. Now, obviously, if you don't do a good job after a while, you may lose that trust, but the trust is automatic from the beginning.
Yeah.
Whereas in a management role, it's a little bit different in that you walk into that role, and the first kind of reaction from your colleagues, or from your previous colleagues who are now your people that you technically manage, is, okay, prove yourself.
Right.
It's not an automatic thing. So I think you've got these skills as a teacher, which are these soft skills that I mentioned. But as a manager, you can use those skills. But firstly, the first thing you have to do is to earn people's respect.
Right.
Which, in a sense, you do as a teacher too. But it's a little bit different. The kind of the respect is more automatic from students than it is from teachers.
Yeah. I suppose it's sort of from the perspective of the classroom, right? The teacher is generally viewed there, and students have that expectation. And the idea of proving yourself as a manager, would you think, like, I'm going to get to the advice questions in a moment, but we often hear, I've been to conferences and I've heard people say, just because you're a good teacher doesn't mean you're a good manager.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? And how do teachers, because as you said, most managers are promoted from being a teacher. How do you deal with that if we're saying that most teachers may be good teachers, but you may not necessarily be a good manager?
Well, I mean, obviously, as you say, the majority of managers are basically selected from this rank of good teachers.
Yeah.
This is where they come from. And you could argue that there's a problem in that model, in that we've taken someone who's proven themselves to be a good teacher and taken them out of the classroom. Well, why would we do that?
Right.
But obviously there's also the fact that people become good teachers because they're dedicated, because they work hard on their own professional development. They listen, they reflect, they do all those things, which are also clearly good qualities
for a manager
in other jobs too. So so to become a manager, once you become a manager, if you're one of these dedicated people who wants to look into it, wants to study, wants to learn more, wants to improve yourself, then you'll be a good manager.
Right.
So there is plus and minus with the idea that you take a teacher and move them into manager, because obviously good teachers typically are good teachers because they work at it.
Right.
And to become a good manager, you work at it. You study, you read, you think, you reflect on what you didn't do, what didn't work, and you go that way. Right. One of the small problems, I would say, is that whilst we have qualifications which kind of provide an entry hurdle to get into the classroom, obviously not necessarily everyone, but the vast majority of people have done some form of qualification before they are in the classroom. The same is not necessarily true of management.
Right.
So you've done your teaching qualifications and you've proved yourself to be a good teacher, and then you're just moved into management without qualification, without taking a course, without studying, without necessarily having workshops and presentations and courses to learn how to manage. and to practice the skills that you need. And I think I don't think ELT is unique in this. I think this is many business, many organizations, many industries work in this way. People get moved into management, and there's very rarely management training.
Right.
It's on the job. You get involved and you do it, and you sink or swim, basically.
Yeah.
And I think it's very, very common. I mean, increasingly now there are more courses and there are more books, for example, on academic ELT management, academic management. But 20 years ago there was almost nothing. And it's slowly moved forward, and now there are courses, and there are things you can take. There are courses you can take.
So would you say that okay, so let's say we have a teacher who has been given the opportunity to move into some kind of management position, whether it's an assistant DOS or a DOS, and or they would like to in the future. What would be your advice to this teacher? I imagine a qualification of sorts would be one option.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of options. If you're interested in going into management, you could ask your own boss, can I shadow you? Can I, if your boss when your boss goes on holiday, you maybe step forward and can be the acting assistant director or whatever for a couple of weeks, so you get a sense of what's involved, and or volunteering for projects. If there's projects that have to be done, curriculum development projects or whatever, you can put your hand up and manage that project if you like. Because I think project management in some ways is a bite-sized chunk of management, and it's a good way of learning some skills. So those are things you can be doing. Obviously, there are books you can read, and then there are some training courses out there which are good for new managers, good for practicing managers, like a bit more like a Delta is a practicing teacher qualification rather than a pre-service.
Right. Speaking about Delta or a DipTESOL and other diploma level qualifications, do you think they're good stepping stones for moving into management?
I'm not sure. It's. I mean, obviously, with the Delta, there is now an option in Module 3 to do a management piece, which obviously would be a useful way to build some of those skills. But the Delta is a teaching qualification, so it's. I mean, you can do that option within Module 3, but the rest of it is about becoming a better teacher, and is about sort of validating what you do or enhancing your teaching and so on. So, I mean, all professional development, I think, has a value, and it has something which will stand you in good stead. But I think I wouldn't necessarily say that doing a Delta is a logical step towards management. I mean, it's a step that many people take, but it's not necessarily the logical way of doing it. But I mean, I think. I mean, I certainly don't want to disparage the Delta, which I think is a very good qualification. It's just that I'm not sure it really takes you towards a management position. I think it takes you to be an expert teacher.
Yeah. I think I completely agree. A number of in other Spanish chats we spoke about, does the Delta develop you to be a trainer? Pretty much we all agreed that it doesn't develop you as a trainer. It develops you as as a very proficient teacher. And you become aware of just how much you don't know, pretty much, So I think I second your thoughts there. I didn't actually do the module 3 in management, so I have no experience with that. But like you said, it's only one of the modules, and the rest that it's actually assessed is very much just focused on teaching. I suppose the only benefit there was, as managers, you may be asked to provide feedback to teachers, and that experience would be very useful. I mean, as a trainer, that's certainly made me much more critical of my own teaching, which has helped me provide feedback to others.
I mean, obviously, I would say that teacher training actually does give you some skills which are translatable quite easily, such as giving feedback. I mean, those being a CELTA trainer, for example, is you have to go through that process of being able to give feedback because it's so key to the success of the CELTA candidate, is
Right.
is receiving good feedback.
Of course, yeah. Are there any courses? You said that the international diploma is in the stages of
It's kind of on hold at the moment.
Right. Yeah. Are there any other courses for management that you would recommend, or any other places where teachers could look to gain some experience?
Yeah, there are about 3 that come to mind.
Okay.
International House has a DOS course, Director of Studies course, which I think is very good. So that's possibly it's more of a management entry level thing. It's Director of Studies course, rather. Some of the other ones are kind of management, which are more MA level, if you like. They may not lead to an MA, but they're sort of MA level, which may be slightly more. It could be aimed at anyone. Could be school owners could take them, and so on. Whereas the IH DOS course, which is a very good course, is very aimed at that level. I mean, people like you, assistant directors of studies, directors of studies, because and which I think is very valuable and is a very useful course to take. Within the UK market, there is something called the DELTM, Diploma in English Language Teacher in Management, English Teaching in Management, ELT Management, and that's run by English UK. And it's sort of connected to Trinity, Trinity examinations. It's very much it's based in the UK, and it is really for the UK market. So people who are directors of studies and managers in the UK. And then Nile, which now have quite a lot of very good online courses, has one in management in language education. And probably as a disclaimer, I should say I teach on that too, just because I should explain my biases. But I think it's a very good course. It's an entirely online course. It could be, you can have it as part of an MA, because Nile has an MA. So you can do an MA in language teaching management with this connected.
Brilliant.
Through the University of Chichester in the UK, but the course is a global course, and we get people from all over the world taking this course, and it's entirely online.
I'm signed up to start in September, so not for my
not the management one, but
the 2 modules I've chosen are trainer development and management ELT, but I'm doing the core module first. And so I originally was meant to go somewhere else, but I changed my mind to Nile, and I'm very happy to be part of that. So I imagine, will you be the tutor on the?
It's possible, but possibly I can't tell you because I have no idea. I just finished a group, but whenever there's a next group coming, they'll either contact me or not. It's very possibly it'll be Martin Clark, who's the course leader of it. Yeah, he's the leader of the course, basically the course leader.
Brilliant, excellent. Right, well, many pieces of advice there, and I'm always. I feel very positive about courses. I don't think courses solve everything, but I think they provide at least a clear framework for teachers, and I think that's necessary. Like you said, many teachers move into management with nothing, and they stay there like that.
I think one of the things that I've really experienced as a tutor on these courses is that for managers, especially new managers, but also people who've been managing for a little while, what you get from a course is you get 2 things, which you get the skills, you get the content, you get the information that's part of the course and the skills development and so on. But you also get a network,
right?
And it's somehow that's incredibly important, because as teachers, if you're a teacher, you tend to work in a school where you have a staff room where you've got a bunch of colleagues who you can bounce ideas off, and you can say, I've got module 4 in the course book today. I hate module 4. I've never managed to make it work. Does anyone have any ideas? And people can talk to each other and say, yeah, I do this. This activity works really well. And you've got this peer network, which is this brilliant thing that you have as a teacher. And management is quite lonely. because quite often you've got no one you can ask those questions to. You can't say, look, I've got this teacher who's causing me a lot of problems. What should I do? Because you can't ask a teacher that.
Of course not. No.
And you often can't ask anybody else in your organization that. You've got to handle it. And what the courses do, on top of all of the information you get and the skills you learn, you also get that network. You get other managers around the world who are your classmates, who you can say, look, I've got this problem. Do you have any ideas?
Brilliant.
And you can raise those things, which I think is a real huge advantage with management courses. And I've really noticed it when all of the ones I've ever taught, how useful that little group becomes.
Yeah. No, that I can say I've experienced that as a trainer. The courses I've taken, or the meetings that I've had with other trainers, I've been able to bounce ideas off constantly, because obviously in my context I'm the only trainer and perhaps the one with the most experience, so it's still quite difficult times when I'm implementing new ideas and I still need to bounce them off. So I can manage in a more managerial position that becomes even more important when the business is on the line, in a sense. No, very, very interesting. Now, the last section of the talk is always book recommendations. Now, I suppose you're a little bit biased in the sense that I actually don't have a copy of it here, but I've had the pleasure to flick through Teacher to Manager, and very, very dense. There's so much information packed in there. I imagine that would be one of your book recommendations for modern day sort of language academies, no?
Yeah. So yes, obviously, if I to put that aside, that's one book I would definitely recommend. I think in some ways it's sort of like one of the starter texts, if you like. I noticed that you just picked up Management in English Language Teaching.
Yeah, I've had this one for years, and I believe you wrote with Ron White as well.
Ron White and I were basically the co-authors of From Teacher to Manager, and we worked together on the IDLTM that we already mentioned. And in fact, From Teacher to Manager kind of came out of that previous book, because they're both CUP books. But that one's 91. That was published in 91, which obviously is now 30 years ago. So it's sort of, it's not exactly up to date. And then so From Teacher to Manager was published in 2008, I believe. So again, it's now knocking on a bit. It's not exactly a very, very up to date book. It's 13 years old. So but since From Teacher to Manager came out, which came out really when there was almost no other books in the market apart from Management in English Language Teaching, which it was designed to sort of replace. Since that time, there are more. And there are a couple of quite good ones. There's one in the ETpedia series, written by Fiona Dunlop and someone whose name I've completely forgotten. I apologize for that. But that's a really good book. Fiona Dunlop is the academic director at the Wimbledon School of English, which is consistently one of the gets the highest rating as one of language schools in the UK. And she's great. And the book is really, 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 really good. There's one published by OUP, which is kind of part OUP, part equals, equals the quality body. Written by Richard Rossner, which is quite good. There are a couple from the US. If you look up a writer called Christine Coombe has written a number of books on things like assessment and so on, but she's also big in leadership and management. There are 2 or 3 books, one from the University of Michigan Press, I forget where else, but on leadership in ELT. I mean, they're sort of US focused, but there's still a lot of really valuable stuff there. And again, without wanting to blow my own trumpet a bit, CUP are bringing out a new series of educational management handbooks, we're calling them, coming out basically at the turn of the year, early 2022, on specific management topics in ELT. And the reason I'm sort of hesitant to talk about them, but I feel like I should mention, is that I'm the series editor. And so one of them is on leading technological change in ELT. One of them is on managing well-being in ELT. and one of them is on managing professional development at
Wow.
ELT. Those are the first 3 that will be published. There should be more beyond
Sure.
those 3, but those are the first, and they should all come out around the beginning of next year.
Wow. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for all of those. And it seems like the only title that I had heard of is the ETpedia one by Fiona. And I haven't had the pleasure to look through it, but I've heard very good things about it.
It's really good, yeah.
But the other ones, would you say, because one thing that I've realized is it seems like our sector, ELT, it still lacks a lot of, how would you say it? It seems like we can still steal a lot from other areas within business. Is that something that you've done a lot throughout your career? Looked at other areas, for example, in other areas of business management, and brought that to ELT to make it effective?
In some ways, yeah, that I feel kind of that's my job, really.
Right.
In some ways, that's it's sort of how I perceive my role, is reading management articles or management books, and then
Making them
sort of mapping those onto what I know about the ELT business and the ELT industry, and what I experience from my own experience in it, and also talking to various people who are academic managers, obviously, because I work with academic managers. I hear loads and loads of stories, and I hear from them about what issues they've faced and what problems they face. So it's sort of taking this kind of theory, if you like, and mapping it onto our world.
Right.
And so I sort of feel that's what I do. Anyway, as a trainer and as a writer, that's really how I sort of operate.
Right.
But yeah, so we don't have a huge amount of literature out there, but I mean, with various LAMSIG, which I was the previous coordinator of, the Leadership and Management Special Interest Group for IATEFL has a newsletter which has articles about ELT management, which is also a great resource for people who are interested. And if you go to the LAMSIG website, you can click on this thing that says archived articles, and you can find for free a bunch of articles that have been written over the years. And obviously, if you become a member of LAMSIG, then you get all the new ones as well. But that's a good resource. But there aren't many other resources, because we're not a big somehow. Well, I mean, for good reasons, much of the energy in our field in terms of research and in terms of writing is on the teaching side of it, because clearly that's the big part of our work, and making that work much more successfully and effectively is clearly the most important thing.
Yeah, brilliant. Wow, it sounds like obviously with the new series coming out, a lot of the new sort of issues that have come up over the last few years, perhaps with how the world is changing, the pandemic, are going to be addressed. I suppose my last question before we head off then is, with the pandemic, I don't know if I should say coming to an end, but with the pandemic sort of changing, how do you see the next year or two within ELT?
I think there are two very different worlds in ELT. Right. Rather two very different worlds as they have been affected by the pandemic. So we've got what we refer to as onshore markets, which is places like Spain, where you are, where your students are from. You work in Zaragoza, your students are in Zaragoza. That's basically where they are.
Yeah.
And so this is the onshore market model. And obviously you've got issues that have come up through the pandemic, the fact that you probably had to go online for quite a long time, maybe you still are. Some people are doing this hybrid thing, which I have no idea how that works, I have to be honest with you. And dealing with that, and dealing with the fact that you had to manage people remotely, you've had remote teams, you've done this kind of work. And I think those things will carry on, and that's to an extent those things will carry on. There will still be a lot of remote stuff, whether it's remote learning or remote management and remote teamwork. But to an extent, I think that we'll work that out, and we have worked that out probably to a large extent. Then there's the other aspect, the other area of ELT, which is the offshore market world, which is places like the UK, Ireland, Australia, the US, Canada, etc., where students travel to go there.
Okay.
The market is elsewhere. The market's in another country.
Yeah.
And for those people, I think it will be a long time before the pandemic and its effects will be over for them.
Wow.
Because it's not just adapting education, it's not just adapting management, it's also adapting to the fact that nobody is traveling, and nobody's going to be traveling for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, even if, let's say, by the end of this year, most of the world is fully vaccinated and we feel quite comfortable with things, I still think it'll be a year or so before people feel comfortable to start traveling to any degree, and especially sending their kids to another country when you don't know if they can come home again, because I think the trauma of that for families has been very high.
Yeah.
So I think that industry is still going to be a long
way off.
The recovery of that side of our world is a long way off.
Right.
Unfortunately, sadly.
Unfortunately.
It's going to be tough.
Wow. Well, let's hope for the best, right? And it seems like, like you said, in Spain here, it hasn't actually been too bad now. But I have colleagues, for example, in Australia, and it's a very different story. So definitely. Well, Andy, I won't keep you any longer. I feel like today has been massively educational for me. And I'd just like to thank you for sharing your insights and your thoughts on academic management and many things there. I'll leave a lot of links to, for example, to your book and to the other books that you've mentioned in the blog post, and especially to the IETFL LAM6 site. And well, hopefully we get to one day see each other, maybe
we're meeting face to face in a conference somewhere,
or on the MA. Who knows?
Maybe you could be my student on the Nile MA program.
That would be an absolute privilege. Well, Andy, thank you very much. Take care, and we'll speak soon. Okay.
Great. Thanks, James.
Thanks. Take care. Bye.